Hi everyone, I just wanted to share a table that I just found earlier today, and this is coming up on the word mitosis. And as you can see here, when you put in the word mitosis, there's only one match. It comes up in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 20, verse 17 through 18, and I thought that was an interesting number that it comes up in. And the way I came up with the idea for this table is I originally wanted to try to explain why I believe Mark 11 is really about DNA, that's the imagery that's presented in this chapter, the restoration of the temple. And of course there's going to be the true restoration of the temple, but there's also going to be the mark of the beast. And there's ultimately two marks that one can take. There's either the mark of the Holy Spirit, which is talked about here in Ephesians 1:13. It says, "In whom ye also trusted, after that ye heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, in whom also after that ye believed, you were sealed with that Holy Spirit promise, which is the earnest of our inheritance until the redemption of the purchased possession unto the praise of his glory." And so this word sealed, which is this word right here in the Greek, this is the root form, it's the word sphragizo, and you can see that it means a seal or a stamp. It's basically what it is in the Greek. But of course this is a spiritual seal that we receive when we receive the seal of the Holy Spirit. But when you look at some of the other translations, you see that they use the word mark, the word marked. Okay, so there's the true mark, the mark of the Holy Spirit, and then there's the false mark, the mark of the beast, which of course would result in a red wedding, as well as the Battle of Armageddon, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And I believe both of those things will happen at the same time, because over here, as you can see, Mark 13, it says, "But when you shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing where it ought not, let him that readeth understand, then let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains." But then in Luke 21:21, it says, "And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains." So I believe they both take place at the same time. And so you have one table that was coming up in the second book of Kings, chapter 3, which was a foreshadow of the Valley of Jehoshaphat, or the Valley of Megiddo, the Battle of Armageddon. This is a foreshadow of that, and as we're told in Joel 3, the reason for that is because of the parting of the land of Israel. And so that's why I put in the word part. And you see it's coming right through the word Israel right here, the letters P-A-R-T, and then land is coming up using the L in the word Israel. So this is talking about the parting of the land of Israel, is actually what's talked about in Joel 3. But you see the terms coming up here in the second book of Kings, chapter 3. And then you also see the word Jehoshaphat going right through the word, or right through the letter P, that makes the word part in ELS form in the green. And then you see the word valley over here, where it's talking about valley of trenches, which were filled with water, but the water looked like blood in this matrix. So this was a foreshadow of the Valley of Jehoshaphat, or the Battle of Armageddon. And then the other table that was coming up for Obama Bride was coming up in Mark 11. And what I wanted to try to explain is why I believe Mark 11, the chapter, the imagery that's presented in this chapter is actually the restoration of the temple. I wanted to try to explain that, but of course there's always the true restoration, and then there's the false. There's the true wedding, which will be the wedding of Jesus to the bride of Christ, but then there's also the false wedding, which would be the red wedding. Okay, so that's why I have all these tabs up here. I was going to try to explain that, and I may do that later in this video, or maybe do it in another part later on. But in the meantime, I came upon this word mitosis that I wanted to talk about and try to explain. And in case you don't know what that is, I'll just read the definition. It says, the usual method of cell division characterized typically by the resolving of the chromatin of the nucleus into a thread-like form, which condenses into chromosomes, each of which separates longitudinally into two parts, one part of each chromosome being retained in each of two new cells resulting from the original cell. And I was actually going to try to explain the imagery of this. Before this can actually take place, there needs to be DNA replication, which is something I was going to talk about, which is really what I believe is being described in this matrix over here in Mark 11. And I'll try to explain that next. But in the meantime, I just thought of trying to do a table on mitosis. And this is what Lady Gaga was talking about in this video over here. This was a video by Jonathan Kleck, and I'm just going to read what she says, or at least part of what she said. She said, this is the manifesto of Mother Monster on goat, and then it shows, I'll just go ahead and play part of the video. Okay, and then it shows this image over here, which is supposedly a goat, but it also looks like the female reproductive system. And she says, on goat, a government-owned alien territory in space, a birth of magnitude and magical proportions took place, but the birth was not finite, it was infinite. As the wombs numbered and the mitosis of the future began. And so I'll just show the rest of the video where she says that and the imagery that's in this video. And so she ends by saying, and thus began the beginning of a new race. So this is what Satan is planning. He's planning a mitosis, but I believe there's also the true mitosis, which is what I want to try to explain the imagery of when I get to this part over here about Mark 11. But in the meantime, I just thought I would try to put in the word mitosis. And as you can see, it comes up in Ezekiel 20:17 and 18. And so I tried putting some other terms in here. These were just some other terms that I could think of. There's probably lots of other terms, but these are the only ones I could think of for now. But I put in the word seed, egg, Adam, Eve, Lord, Adam, rend, and tear, because I believe this is all about, ultimately it's about the splitting of the atom. I believe there's more to it than just the DNA. I believe it's going to go down to the atom, to the smallest particle being split. And so all these terms came up. And I can talk about the word atom a little bit more later, but you see that coming up here in the yellow, with the letters A, T, O, M, and it's coming right through the word mitosis, which is coming up here in the red with the letters M, I, T, O, S, I, S. And then you see the word rend over here, which means to tear. It's the same word as tear, and it's sharing the R in the word tear. So you see the word tear in the burgundy with the letters T, E, A, R. And then you see the word rend, which means the same thing as tear, with the letters R, E, N, D. And I can talk more about the word rend later, but as you can see, this is coming up in the book of Ezekiel, starting in chapter 20, verse 13, and going through to verse 22. And it was in the verses 17 and 18 that you had the word mitosis. And this, these numbers over here I thought were really interesting, because if you go to verse 13, it's talking about rejecting God's ordinances. So it seems to be making reference to the covenant. And there were some things that happened in 2013 that might relate to that. And so now we're in the year 2017. And this reminded me of another table that I did. I did a table some time ago on the words Theo, which means God, and this word right here means appearance, theophany. It's another word for epiphany, which is the word that's used in the Bible for the Lord's appearance. And you see that comes up 27 times, which I've talked about. The number 27 seems to relate to the Lord's appearance as well. And that was coming up in Matthew 20:12 through 20:17. And so now we have the word mitosis coming up in Ezekiel 20:17. And mitosis, Lady Gaga said that in Satan's view, that's the new race that Satan wants to create. She said that mitosis is the beginning of the new race. But then, of course, there's the true mitosis, which would be the restoration of the temple, which is what I believe is talked about here in Mark 11. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about DNA and the imagery that I see being represented in Mark 11. And I also want to go over the rest of this table and to read the matrix, but I'll have to do that in the next video since I'm about out of time. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.